mother was the Schneck. My dad's mother. Perma Schneck.
Oh, your Poppy's niece. Perma and Poppy were sister and brother, right?
Yes.
Norman
I don't know
Schneck.
what was-
Norman Schneck.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I knew you looked familiar. I just can't put people together when I only see them
I
once a
know,
year.
I know. I'm
You're related
granddad.
to Keith.
Yes, Keith is my cousin.
This looks like ours.
What does it look like?
It looks like our fireplace. Well, only for
Wow.
another 5 days, it's all.
Oh.
It's like 3 times as long. It looks just like this.
So steep. Okay, I got it. I guess when you cooked everything, you had kind of deep.
Yep, that's it. All right, everyone.
Oh, look, somebody moved the rocks.
Yep, so those are all
That's what I do.
donated. So
You should donate mine.
I'll do a little bit of reading off of what we have, and then I'll ad-lib some stuff that we've changed. So if you haven't been in the house recently, there has been some changes. I know the last Schneck reunion, we had it opened up. If you weren't there at that point, which was 2 years ago now, we used to have a divider wall here. Paul's bed used to be right in the corner there. That is now upstairs.
Oh.
So traditionally, when this came over, this property was part of a 23-acre land warrant granted to Adam Schneck. So it was a warrant. What does that mean? That means it wasn't a deed. He didn't buy the land outright. Settlers and frontiersmen, when they came over, they had to apply for a warrant. And what that did was give you the chance to develop and make something of the land. Once you were able to make something of the land and prove that it's workable, then you can go and petition for the deed and claim and own the land. So
Did you actually have to pay money for it?
yeah,
Okay.
so the warrant was granted, and Adam had to pay off that land after a certain amount of time, and he never personally completed that payment. That payment was passed on to his sons and down the family, and then it was finally paid off. So it was granted to Adam Schneck, who came to this area about 8 years after arriving from Germany. So Darlene was quizzing me, and it was 1749 when he arrived from off the ship Christian, from the Württemberg. No, that's where he was coming from. Rotterdam. Yep.
Rotterdam.
So Rotterdam, and he came over. And
Rotterdam. Is that Germany or Holland?
no, that's Holland. That's in the Netherlands. And then came down into Philadelphia, where he most likely stayed in what was now called Germantown. And after the walking purchase, migrated up here.
That was 1749.
Yep, 1749. So these lands became available from the infamous walking purchase that started in 1737. I won't digress the history of that because that'll take too long.
Do you mind pictures of yourself?
No, I don't mind at all.
Okay.
So he eventually was able to pay it off. He subsequently took out warrants for approximately 300 acres. So this was the first tract, Schneck Hole, and around this area. And then by the time everything was done, he had 300 acres of land, which were eventually satisfied. And like I said, this was eventually satisfied by his sons and grandsons, who sold the lots off, now, which is now along 309. So where Schneck Tech is, or L-Tri-C, that was part of the land all the way down through here was all part of the Adam Schneck land. And we have the board outside that Henry Schneck donated to the society that shows the transfer of land, and it's really nicely done outside. The tax rolls of 1798 show several log houses in this area were being taxed. One was larger and one was smaller, and one approximately this size. This house was owned by a Schneck, and the historical records show that Adam Schneck arrived here in 1758. There is no other paper trail for the property and does not meet standards, so we weren't able to get this under the National Registrar, or Historical Registrar. The fact that the log structure of this approximate size was on the tax roll in 1798 and was owned by a Schneck allows us to interpret that this place as a sample-sized Germanic farmstead. We speculate that at some later date the house had a second and a half story added, and we know that complementary it had contemporarily, it had many additions and changes. So over there, it looked like it's a normal house that we would live in today. So I know, Joanne, you were talking about the fireplace. Looks like yours.
Yeah.
Because it is more like yours. This is not the original fireplace that would have
That
been
would
in
have
here.
been too heavy to.
This was actually made out of the foundation that the house existed on. So they reused the corner block from the house when it was over there to build this chimney, because we had to update it. So now it's poured on a poured concrete slab. So now we have a basement, a kitchen, a heat pump downstairs, and all of that. The original, when you go upstairs, you'll be able to see a hole that goes up into the attic where a pipe was. That's originally probably where the first stack or the stove or the chimney would have been. When you go upstairs too, you'll see a cutout on the floor here. My best educated guess is that's where the original stairwell was. Normally in a house like in a log home, you wouldn't have a stairwell on the end. You'd have it more centralized to allow heat to rise up. But originally the roof would have been right above us here. And I know the house that you just visited the other day that you grew up in, that's probably what this looked like to begin with. One story, and as the family grew, they added the second and a half story. Let's see here. So, originally across the street, we already talked about that. So originally, where that McDonald's was, is where this house was. And over on this bench, I was able to gain articles donated. These were donated by Ann Kern that show the moving of the house. I remember as a little child back in 1994 looking at the morning call when it came out and seeing this, which was really interesting growing up that young. But you can see they hired a crew of Amish workers to come over and help raise the house and lift the house up. And it was put on a flatbed and pulled across the road. And over there I do have a letter. The Kerns asked a lot of the neighboring community and other people to write letters, so they could present that to the lawyer and say why this house was so important. So I have one of Curtis's letters out for display as well. And I also have in our files one of the letters back from J. King Jr. Of King's Market that agreed that they would set aside this land for the Schneck House, which is really cool. And like I said out there, it dates back to 1989 is when they started this contract, and Kern said, no, I don't want to sell. And then they kept pressuring, and then they were able to...
King owned this property too?
Yeah, this whole thing was all owned by
across the street.
the land developers and J. King.
Yeah.
So, talking about what's down here and what you see in this room. So this would have been the common living area once that second and a half story was created. So we have our hanging pie chest. The hanging pie chest, basically self-explanatory. This was their 1750 refrigerator. So they would put their baked goods and other non-perishables and perishables in these chests to keep it off the floor from rodents and other pests.
Can I just get another picture of it?
Yeah, go ahead. Right now there's other knickknacks in it, but that's the pie chest. We have our spinning wheels where they would spin and they would create their own clothes to have yarn and other textiles. We're in process of making and recreating a replica kitchen table, a nice farm table. So we have the wood. My dad just has to join it and then build the legs. So that's what would be down here. You would have your kitchen area. This is where you would cook. You would actually cook on the open hearth. Traditionally, they could have or would have had a outdoor kitchen, and that's what we had back in the mid to late 90s. We had an Eagle Scout project put up what we call as the goat barn. And what you would have there is you'd have your small stable, and then you would have your butcher's kitchen. So that's where you would do all your rendering of the meat and skins and cook outside. So we actually have an open hearth. The last time we hosted an open gate in October, that's where we cooked our soup. And I had a good fire going in there. We brought up the big kettle from the basement, had that mounted, and we were serving soup and apple cider off that fire. So, moving up, we also have stuff, so when you come back down, we have some displays of what it was like circa, we have different pictures here from Main Street, Schnecksville, and other historical books. So as we move upstairs, we have a little bit more display. Just be careful walking up, hold on to the handrail if you have to. Yep.
Yeah, that's bigger than I remember.
Adam, is that where you think the chimney was?
So
It was
I
not in the
think-
center of the house?
No, here's one. So they might have had a coal stove at one point as they upgraded, but this is one of the stacks right here. But
Because I
this-
know a lot of German houses, the central chimney went through the center.
Correct, and I think that's probably closer to where it would have been.
Okay.
Oh, Ginger
Um,
Weiss.
But right around here.
Okay.
Did you put it off to the side just for, was it?
I'm not sure. I don't have that information. That would have been Curtis.
Yeah.
Would have had more explanation on
Right.
that. I wasn't able to talk to him to
Yes.
figure that out. But if you look around here, this area right in here is where I believe probably one of the main staircases or the original chimney would have
And the
been,
usual line.
is the way it's cut out. Normally these boards would run, if you look at the bottom, if you look at the floor in the on the first floor, those are the original boards. These are also the original boards, but they probably had to cut them to make them work for this. But if you go downstairs in the kitchen and look up, it's all painted with milk paint and really cool.
Oh, down in the basement?
Yeah, so, alright, in the basement, they have the boards that are painted face down now, but that would have been painted face up.
Where did
So-
you say you could see
There's
up?
my bed.
So right here, that was the hole, so
That's
there
your
might have been a,
Don't even
there might have
Yeah,
been,
this is, so you
yes,
can-
there's that upstairs as well.
Wow.
Yep,
Is it big?
Dad, this is your bed,
I
right?
can just barely
Do
see.
you wanna tell the story? Do you wanna tell the story about the
bed
head?
when you were growing up.
Dad, tell the story about the headboard.
No.
The headboard.
Yes.
When I was a young
Storage and-
when I was a young
Does
boy,
everybody want
I
to
had
hear
a
that?
camera that would shoot
This
a
house is
dart.
cheap
A what?
with so many-
It was a dart with a rubber.
It was a gun?
Yeah, well, it was made to.
It was like a camera?
It was like camera. You press it, and then the spring would pop this thing out with a little rubber stopper.
Yeah.
On it. And I put a nickel in the stopper and shot it up there, and it left a ring up in the headboard.
Do you wanna point it out to
I don't
me?
know if I can see it.
Wall.
Okay.
And I was gonna give it away when Tom got sick and we had
Yeah.
to move. But I didn't.
Is that it right there?
So
Yeah, there it is.
something together.
There it is.
There it is right
Like,
here.
I heard this how they did up in New England.
Yeah, that would be perfect. We can put it downstairs and.
And you slept on this you slept on this bed, Dad, when you were a little boy, and this was in the Schneck family.
Oh yeah, that was my
This was-
bed, and then
That was your
that
grandmother's.
bed- that was our bed when we got married.
Yeah, but that was your grandmother's bed, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It was a rope bed.
It was a rope bed, and it had
Most of
it
the
had
stuff
a
was
smaller bed that you would pull out.
Yeah.
Would you have?
You would slide it out. It was a low bed
We
for
don't have.
Oh, for
Some-
children.
for children.
For underneath, wow.
I don't know what they call them, trundle.
And trying to develop it.
Look that up
So
sometime.
my
But it had a bed
viewpoint
under
of
the
what
bed.
My vision is this, you'll come upstairs.
And you
and it'll be
donated
in
it
case
to
you-
the Schneck
so we'll be
House
able to
back in the
display things.
90s, I guess it was.
Yeah, probably,
Downstairs,
right.
We'll be able to display things, so you walk in,
Look at
it's a
it. It
museum.
needs paint.
And
I
then,
had so
Well, it
much
kind of
stuff
is
in my
now.
house.
it is,
Yeah.
and then
It is,
that's
but
what
I
we're
gave-
working towards.
I either sold or gave.
Not a problem.
I have to tell you this one story.
Family's big.
I told Arlene years ago that when I was a kid,
I feel
I had
bad
a
now.
toy camera that had a spring in it, and we'd shoot a little dart out with,
Yeah.
with a sponge on it, and I put a nickel on it, and it left this ring. It left this ring from the nickel.
That is
It's
cool.
still
Yeah.
there.
It's still there. I'm gonna frame it and put acetate across it, so now that is now part of the Schneck House.
Did you get my second
Alright,
text?
so,
What's that?
on the second floor, as the family grew, this would become the sleeping quarters. So as we have on display, we're trying to fix this bed because it was originally, the post in the back is not the original post. So we're trying to refurbish it so we can kind of give you what it would look like without a full completion, and how it would be strung together. So that phrase "sleep tight" is about rope beds because it's made with ropes, and that's what strung your box spring is your ropes, and then your mattress. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Is because it was packed with straw and other grasses.
Yeah.
So this is a straw bed. So you'd have a traditional straw bed, and then canopy beds would be the same way from thatched roofs, but that was more New England, where you would, or England, when you had thatched roof and straw roofs, you'd constantly have things falling down on you. So you had the 4-post bed, and you'd put a sheet above it, so you wouldn't get the feces, and because you'd have ducks up there and all these other things, and bugs falling down. So that's where you would have the 4-post bed from. But in our sense, yeah, it wasn't just aesthetics. Nothing really was aesthetics in the working class and the working families. It all had a purpose. Everything had to be functional.
Are you saying that this is more New England?
I'm not sure.
They use it around here too.
They would use it around. I don't know if they would use it around here, but this style, when you'd have that 4-post canopy with the thing, that's why they would have it, to prevent things from falling down on them. But for our purpose, more of the beds were more like this. And this was donated by Paul in his old house. So they would sleep up here, and then would go downstairs. But most of the time they spent their time outside or in that first floor.
And Paul is the connection. Who's Paul?
That's Paul.
Oh, you're
He
Paul.
donated the bed.
But your dad is Norman.
Norman.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But you're
He's
like
like that.
Norman.
Yes,